And you know how we do, we rationalize it. Well, this just makes sense. Let's just do it this way. And it does make sense if you continue to rationalize. And then those moments in time when you realize it falls apart and you're like, dude, what is it? And God's like, nah, I want your full attention on this. There are things that I have gifted you to do that you don't even know yet. I need you to go through X, Y, and Z for it to come out and to manifest it.
I feel like entrepreneurs are control freaks. and this is why partnering with God is very uncomfortable, because God wants a full surrender, the trust, and then we want to control God even.
When we hear niche, we think that it means less. And we think, I'm cutting off this part of the market. When you niche down, you actually get more clarity, you get more certainty, you get more credibility. You have to make sure you're focusing on relevance over routine, because the more relevant you are within yourself, the more you start to push away the things that are unnecessary.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Making a Masterpiece. And today we have a treat. Welcome to the show, Steve Worthy. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. What's that saying in radio? Long-time listener, first-time caller type of deal. Yeah, been admiring what you've been doing, what you've been putting together, and super excited to be here, man.
Oh, wow. The honor is also ours, Steve. Thank you so much for being on our show. And we will go head on to our topic today. And Steve, to help our listeners, our masterpiece makers, to get to know you and your background, could you share how you first stepped into the retail industry and what initially sparked your interest or passion for this field?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I went to undergrad for accounting. I was in the Air Force, and I left the Air Force. At that point in time, you know, accounting was really big in the States. We had the big six, if you will. I don't even know how many big accounting firms we have now, but back then it was like the big six. If you got a job in one of them, you were going to be set for life. So I got my undergrad in accounting, and I hated it. I hated going into the accounting field. Once I got into the accounting field, I realized this isn't for me. I can't do this. I don't like being in a cubicle just in front of a spreadsheet. It didn't fit my mentality or anything like that. I went to visit some family in Charlotte, North Carolina, trying to figure out what my next step was. I didn't know what I was going to do. I said, I need to do something. And so I found this little coffee shop. It was called a Caribou Coffee. I ended up going in there, spending a lot of time talking to the manager. And she said, hold on for a second. You need to meet my manager. About a day later, I met with him, and we just having a conversation about where I was in my career. He said, how long are you in town for? I said, I'm going to be leaving shortly. Can you extend it? My manager is coming into town. And I ended up playing golf with him and his manager. Little did I know, this was like an 18-hole job interview. After that, he offered me a job as a district manager in training, and took it. But I told him, I don't know anything about coffee. Even in undergrad, even in the Air Force, I was a Mountain Dew guy. Like, that's what kept me going. It wasn't coffee. I didn't know anything about the industry. He said, don't worry about that. We'll teach you everything you know. I said, I don't know a lot about retail. I had a couple of jobs in supermarkets when I was a kid, but I don't know anything about it. So he said, don't worry about it. We'll tell you. You're well equipped for what we're going to require of you. And I think this is, and I want to say this for all the people listening, I think the tendency sometimes is that we take what we do and who we are for granted. Because when I told him I didn't know anything about the industry or retail, he started to recant all of my experiences that I had developed being in the Air Force, my leadership skills, my ability to multitask, my ability to lead big teams, lead up, lead down. And I was like, whoa, is that me? Like, all of that stuff, I didn't even know. So I think we take for granted a lot of times what we do just because we're doing it. But when he did that for me, it opened up my eyes to a lot of different possibilities of who I am and what I can do.
Wow. And I mean, just to mention that he retold you your background on the Air Force is not even related to the retail at all.
No, it's not. But I think the fundamentals of leadership, right? Being able to command a room, being able to communicate a vision and get people to buy into that vision, the ability to understand how to operate under stress, operate when things are really well, but then get people to buy into that process of operating in those stressful environments, leading up, I had to do a lot of leading up with captains and colonels. And so how do I communicate issues within my market to my boss and my boss's boss? And so all those different things I didn't realize I had learned or I was equipped to do until he actually talked to me about it.
This is such an interesting story. Air Force, accounting, coffee.
Yeah,
Okay, now,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
now what made you love retail space then?
Oh, mentality. It fits every aspect of who I am in the context of I have the attention span of a 5-year-old. And so the constant change and problem solving within the retail space, it's nonstop. You are constantly in a state of flux. You're constantly in a state of human resources, making sure that you're creating environments where people want to thrive and want to come. You are face forward with the actual customer. You're actually dealing with customers one-on-one, understanding their problems, and then trying to provide solutions. The rhythm, if you will, of retail fit my mentality, fit my perspective, how I like to lead, how I like to see people flourish. So the industry in and of itself just fit who I am.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I can tell that it must have felt like everything fell into place because your training in the military probably prepared you for the fast-paced, ever-changing culture of retail. Retail is one of the hardest, if not the, is still the hardest and the most fast-paced industry in terms of the marketplace because it's constantly changing. It's almost like you need to be ahead of yourself. So wow, how was that transition then? And maybe you can tell us a little bit more of that story because I know since then you came into the coffee industry and went to different companies like Target and Barnes and Nobles, and then you ended up in Sam's Club, one of the household giants. How did you navigate that fast-paced retail life?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of my retail success was the balance of understanding how to lead in a command and control environment, which I was used to with the military, to finally finding my retail leader voice when it comes to leading people, emotional intelligence, approachability. There was a seminal moment in my life when I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina. It set the tone for a lot of other things where I was in a very heavy command and control mentality with my team. It was like, do as I say, not as I do. And I remember I had a really good buddy of mine who was a peer, fellow New Yorker, fellow military guy. He was in the retail industry for about 10 years at that point. He took me out to lunch and he said, Steve, here's the thing. Your team appreciates you, but they're afraid of you. They're afraid to do certain things because of how you're leading. That doesn't work down here. You have to, you're going to find this funny. He said, you're going to have to ask people how their weekend was. I said, what? What do you mean? I was 25, I think 25 or 26 at the time. I said, what do you mean? What do you mean ask people how their weekend was? Like, no, we don't do that. It took me about 2 weeks to get up the nerve because it was outside of my character at that time. One of our Monday morning meetings to say, hey, before we begin, how's everybody's weekend? Now, you could have heard a pin drop. They were like stunned. What do you mean? Is this a trick question, Steve? What's the problem? I was like, no, I was like, what so-and-so start? And they would start and they were very apprehensive at the time. And then over time, I started to realize that this is how you really need to connect. Leadership is all about throttling up and down and not over-indexing on certain aspects of who you are, but being able to throttle up in sort of that command and control and then being able to throttle down and have more approachability at certain parts. And so that set the tone for me to have all of these other additional roles within the retail space to climb the corporate ladder. But if I didn't have that seminal moment in my life, I don't think I would have had any measure of success that I've had or that I had when I was in the retail industry.
I believe it as well. It's not really about the product, it's really about the people, right? It's all about the people. No matter what kind of industry or product you're pushing in the retail space, at the end of the day, it's your relationship with the people you work with. If it's good, then everything will figure itself out. Steve, now you are in a very different space, but still in a similar way. You're now leading this amazing company and you've moved from the other side of the fence to the journey of entrepreneurship. Let's go back to that turning point because I know a lot of our masterpiece makers are probably in that season where you feel like, should I do it? Should I not? I'm really scared. You became a director of this American retail corporation overseeing billions of revenue. You've had some retail success, and that's really impressive. For some people, that's already the dream. Why find a different, why find a difficult life if you're there? What prompted you to leave that high level role to build your company? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of naivete in the amount of work I would actually have to do with what I'm doing now. I think most of us move into this space very naive and thinking that, oh, well, I can just do this and it's just going to be simple. To go back, during my retail career, I found myself being a mentor to a multitude of people, whether it's home office or in stores around the country or whatever. I just found myself being a mentor to people. And then I found myself wanting to coach individuals because I had a coach. I was very blessed throughout my career to have coaches and people who were able to feed into me and give me advice. And so I wanted to do the same thing. I had created this measure of capacity. So I wanted to give more out of that capacity that I've been able to create. And so I found myself coaching people for free on the side. And then I remember my coach was like, this was probably 2015. He said, Steve, you know, you could charge people. And I said, oh man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to charge anybody. He's like, no, I think you should. You're giving away a lot. And so I remember my first client, I charged him $75 for 3 sessions. And it was such a, oh my gosh, I'm charging this person for my intellectual property, if you will. I fell in love with that process. I had started a company while I was still in retail. It was called Worthy Leadership Group. I was coaching and doing some training on the side. I didn't do any marketing. Whatever came my way was just fine. And I was like, okay, I think there's something to this. At this same point in time, I had started another podcast. I got feedback from a podcast coach. And from there, I don't want to spoil the podcast story because I know you have a question for that. But from there, I changed up my entire business practice. I started focusing in on retail leaders. And from there, God just started putting more and more people in my way. He started giving me more and more clarity on, I think this is where you need to be. And I was like, no, I like my money. I'm making good money. He was like, no, I think this is where you need to be. And just over time, it just became more and more clear for me that this is where I needed to go. I know I make it sound very easy. It was extremely hard to leave a steady paycheck, to leave good money in order to struggle these last 2 years financially from a business growth standpoint. But I'm glad I made the move.
It really sounds easy when we talk about it, or even when you think about it. I think being naive was probably a little blessing at that time because you would have never jumped off the cliff.
Never.
Many of our listeners are in that in-between space now, as I've said earlier. There is that feeling of like success that you've sort of like made, but there's also that burning desire inside to do something significant, something you're really good at, and something that you feel like you have value for people. Now, as you navigated your early entrepreneurship journey in a very unfamiliar territory from being on the corporate retail side into the entrepreneur side, what was the hardest part of taking that leap? And what sustained you? You said you've had financial struggles from leaving that amazing life. And then how has your faith played into that role? And what did God do into your heart?
Oh, massively, man. I think the biggest issue was ascribing value to what I do and who I am. In the corporate setting, it was easy to understand my value because there was a paycheck and salary associated with that every year. If I did really well, my value would increase. If I didn't do well, my value wouldn't go. Moving into this entrepreneurial space, I didn't know how to ascribe value to who I am and what I do. And I still struggle with that aspect in certain instances of ascribing the monetary value, right? I'm really good at understanding the qualitative value of what I do. I hear it all the time with clients and feedback, but the actual quantitative and monetary value is always still sort of elusive for me. When it came to moving away from the corporate job into this space, I was very big with teams, right? Because you said it earlier, we can't do anything without our people and teams. A lot of my conversation was around the we, like, well, we're doing this and we're doing this. And my fiance, remember, she's telling me, she said, it's not we, it's you. Like, you're doing this, like, you're creating this, like, you're developing this, you're delivering this. And so it took me a while to move my mindset from the we to really me and God. And part of that journey was that when I got into the entrepreneurial space, I found myself trying to partner with people who were doing something similar or that I could latch onto or that I could connect with because I was so used to working in teams. I heard God was like, this is your vision. I was like, but I want to connect with this person. So I got ahead of God. I said, okay, Lord, I feel like I should connect with this person. And guess what? That opportunity just stopped. And I said, okay, well, here's another person. I was like, let me see if I can, maybe I got it wrong, God. And if I do it this way, it'll work. And God was like, nope, that partnership is not going to work. He continued to speak clearly to me. He's like, Steve, this is your vision. This is the vision that I've given you. You need to fulfill this. I will allow people to come and put people in your path. You can't force it, right? You can't go and try to create something that I don't feel needs to exist right now in this vision that I've given you. And when I I said, okay, that's when the real scary part kind of, started, was like, okay, Lord, I'm not partnering with anybody. This is really just me by myself creating this as you see fit. Ever since I've been doing it that way, opportunity upon opportunity, there's still been difficulties, but the opportunities have started to outweigh the difficulties that I've been experiencing.
Wow. Years ago, I started a personal journey to help provide professional creative communication solutions to brands born out of faith and big dreams, but running on limited resources. Before finding my true calling in ministry, I was an advertising professional, and I always felt frustrated whenever a great idea, product, service, or community initiative didn't take off simply because branding wasn't a priority. I've seen too many faith-oriented entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders make this mistake because they don't have access to professional creative services, or they are put off by the high cost and consumerist approach. I decided to use my experiences in mainstream advertising and in ministry to bridge the gap. The result is a 6-module branding course that can help transform brands, effectively tell their stories, reach their audience, and help them achieve their goals. Teaching this to business owners and leaders, I've seen it transform confusing concepts into real brands that cut through the noise and make real, everyday impact. I believe that brands can be a blessing to the world, solving problems and easing burdens, fueled by passion and driven by purpose. That is what we aim to do with Masterpiece Kingdom Brands. If this resonates with you and you're ready to uncover your kingdom brand, let's connect. Sign up for the Masterpiece Kingdom Brand Building course today. I love what you said. You're like, well, I just got ahead of God. Like, it's too slow. I just got ahead of him and things fall apart. I love what you just shared because it's so real to entrepreneurs listening. We love collaborations, but I think it almost feels like God wanted to shift your mindset from the we to a different kind of we, meaning partnering with him. And that was more important to him than anything else, because it almost like, okay, once you surrendered everything, then people came and the opportunities came. It just went like that. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is real.
Yeah.
That is so awesome.
Yeah. And it's scary because when you're used to having a safety net, you unintentionally start to try to create another safety net, right? And those partnerships and situations were sort of me trying to recreate the safety net that I had established for 27, 30 years within the retail space. And you know how we rationalize it. Well, this just makes sense. Let's just do it this way. And you rationalize the heck out of it. And it does make sense if you continue to rationalize. And then those moments in time when you realize it falls apart and you're like, dude, what is it? And God's like, no, I want your full attention on this. There are things I have gifted you to do that you don't even know yet. I need you to go through X, Y, and Z for it to manifest, because the Steve that you are now is not the same Steve in the retail corporate space. This entrepreneurial Steve has way more to give than this person did. And in order for you to be able to give more, fundamentally, you have to be sound. You have to be solid. You have to be grounded in your relationship with me. You have to be grounded in understanding that there are going to be fiery darts that come. And how are you going to quench those things? Are you going to do it in your own strength, or are you going to focus on me? And so there's a separation that needs to take place where it's just you and him. And when that happens and you give into that, man, it's scary. But then you realize, and God's like, I didn't give you a spirit of fear, right? Every time I try to make up something, God's like, I didn't give you a spirit of fear, right? Come on, I've given the vision to you, right? It's just like, okay, all right, man, all right.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm for sure it must be very hard for you, because you just said you're in the military and that background of controlling, you are trained to, you are wired that way in a very long time, and then suddenly surrendering. That's, I know a lot of our faith-driven entrepreneurs can relate to that. I feel like entrepreneurs are control freaks, and partnering with God is very uncomfortable because God wants a full surrender, the trust, and then we want to control God even.
yeah, yeah. You're like, hey, God, so this is what I've been thinking. He's like, well, I already know what you've been thinking. Like, no, you can't come to me and try to plead your case. I already know what I need you to do.
Yeah. Now, before we move forward, I just want to touch a little bit about your podcast, because we mentioned it earlier. And you said that you started your own podcast back in 2007. People probably didn't realize what podcasts were. So you are one of the pioneers of this industry. So that's really cool. You said that you had broader leadership topics, and then your coach told you to shift focus in your retail expertise. What changed for you when you embraced that clarity? And why do you think a lot of our entrepreneurs struggle to niche down? I think that the temptation there is, man, you're already doing something big and there's a lot of people, but why bother niching, you know? And what kind of breakthrough did that give you personally and in the business?
When we hear niche, we think it means less, right? And we think, well, I'm cutting off this part of the market, this particular individual. But when you niche down, you actually get more clarity, certainty, and credibility when you really find it. In 2007, my buddy and I started a podcast called For Husbands by Husbands. We were teaching husbands at the time how to balance being an entrepreneur and be a husband. We did that for about 5 years. We stopped at around 2012, 2013. Our career started to take off and we didn't have the time to really do it. When I started Worthy Leadership Group, he said, hey, you should start a podcast again. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do it. He said, go ahead and start it. So I started it back up in 2017, 2018. It was called The Worthy Podcast initially. I was at broad topics like leadership, executive coaching, and diversity. 3 massively broad topics. Those are all podcast topics or niches in and of themselves. And I was putting out really good content. I got a podcast coach. Shout out to Charlie Valher. He's all the way over in Australia. We got on the call and he had looked at all of my podcasts. He said, Steve, your content is really good and your ideas are really good, but I think your audience is wrong. And he said, walk me through your retail career. And I was like, man, I don't want to do no podcasts on retail. There are so many podcasts already out there, and I don't want to do one on retail. This is what I want to do it on. He said, just humor me. He said, next week, come back with 13 topics about retail and what your thoughts are. And so I came back to him, the next week. I didn't come back with 13. I actually came back with 40. So I came back with 40 different standalone topics and ideas, and they were centered around retail leadership. They weren't centered around the industry. They weren't centered around supply chain and any of that stuff, customer experience. They were all around retail leadership. What happened was I started to come to terms with all of those conversations I had throughout my retail career and all those issues that people would bring to me that they couldn't bring to other people. I just sat down one day at a coffee shop and I started writing out all the different topics and issues that people were having. I came back to him and he, in classic coaching fashion, said, well, now what are you going to do about it? I was like, I think I'm going to change my podcast. The very next week, I changed everything. I went from The Worthy Podcast to Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy. I changed up my company. I went from Worthy Leadership Group to Worthy Retail. I've never looked back. Niching down brought me more clarity and credibility. Here's the other thing I want the listeners to understand about niching down and what it does with credibility, confidence, and certainty. Within our campus community, which is our membership leadership community, about 30% of the people that are in there are not within the retail industry. I think it's almost closer to 40, right? And what I realized over time was that the more clear I am about leadership and ideas and the things that I want to present, is that people that are outside of my sort of focus market like the clarity of messaging, they like the ideas, and so they move into this space that they may not be familiar with, but they like the certainty of ideas. I think that's the byproduct of niching down, and a lot of people don't understand it or get.
That's good. I love what you said. Niching down doesn't mean less, but niching down means clarity, and that clarity attracts the right people. Oh, that's cool. Well, speaking of retail leadership and your podcast now, what advice? I think a lot of our masterpiece makers listening are into the retail space. They probably run a small retail shop in their city and managing a store and stuff. What advice would you give our kingdom minded brand leaders who feels pulled into too many directions right now with all the noise, all the marketing noise, all the retail hacks online? What are the one or two practical mindset shifts that we need to have so that we can align our business with our personal values and greater purpose?
Yeah. Relevance over routine is one. I've learned over my career, the more relevant I am to my customer base, the better. The less I talk about daily routines and different ideas along that line, someone else could talk about that. The other thing with relevance is that you're okay with allowing other people to talk about whatever they want to talk about and you stay in your lane. It's that same thing with niching down, because the tendency is that we will start to look at, to the left and to the right of us to see what other people are doing. And we're going to think that's really cool. And we're going to think, oh, well, I can add this bit. I can add this little bit to what I do. And it doesn't stick, right? It's almost like two polar sides of a magnet, right? You think it's going to attract, it's going to stick, but they start to repel themselves, because the more relevant you are within yourself, the more you start to push away the things that are unnecessary, because you feel that you need to keep up with the Joneses, right? That's a little American term of looking at your neighbor and trying to stay up to speed with them. And you lose authority when you do that, right? You lose authority because people will know you for your personality type, how you deliver certain things. And then when you start to move away from that, people will recognize that and you lose authority. You have to make sure you're focusing on relevance over routine. And then when it comes to just surrounding yourself with really good people, and dare I say, get a coach. Parts of who you are in your life, you're too close to, right? You are very attached to certain aspects of your personality. You're very attached to ways that you communicate, the ways that you may see the world, which are great and they've served you up until a certain point. You need an outside person to help you move things forward, to help you understand some of the gaps that you may not be able to identify because you're so close to who you are, or you're so close to your vision and your business and your ideas. I'll give you an example. We're developing a tool right now. I started out calling it this, and then I said, I like this name. This name is going to be really good and fancy. I rationalized the heck out of it. I said, oh, this sounds really good. And we started out the project calling it this. Then I sent the idea to my coach. I sent the idea to another good confidant, and then my fiance. And they're like, so love it, hate the name. Go back to this. Go back to the original. I was like, well, I like this. It doesn't make any sense. Go back to the name. And I just said that to say, is this a small example? Is this a very small example? Even I was meeting with my coach for coffee this past Saturday. We're talking about the tool. And he's like, yeah, I love it. I love it. And I could just feel him. I said, but you don't like the name, do you? He's like, nah. He's like, no, go back to this one. I was like, all right, you're the third person. So actually, I was meeting with a developer that's helping me with it. And I said, yeah, we're going to go back to this. It doesn't hinder the developmental process. It actually makes more sense. So I said that to say, we got to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with really good people. Get a coach, get somebody that's going to help you see yourself a little bit broader and help you peel back some of the layers that we're so used to seeing on a daily basis.
Wow. We need to have wise counsel.
Yes.
If the Bible would have said, he would have a wise coaches, but they didn't use the word coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. What an incredible story. Thank you so much, Steve. I'm sure our masterpiece makers are taking down notes and all the gold nuggets that you've just dropped with us today. Thank you so much. Where can our masterpiece makers learn more about you, and how can they find you and connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Worthyretail.com is our website. You can learn about everything that we have going on there. If you want to connect with me, LinkedIn is going to probably be the best place. Go to LinkedIn and just go ahead and connect with me. If you want to spend some time together, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn after we connect, and we'll go forward from there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Steve, and masterpiece makers. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If Steve's story encouraged you, please take a moment to reflect about where God is calling you to take that courageous step to gain greater clarity. Share this episode with someone who needs that push. Remember that your story, your business, and your brand is all part of God's masterpiece that's unfolding in you. Thank you, and I'll see you in our next episode.